Yikes. I made this video about my homebrew ideas for redesigning monster stat blocks in Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and a lot of people did not like it. No joke, it rapidly attained the worst like to dislike ratio of all my videos, and I saw not one, not two, but 3 response videos critiquing what I had to say, hundreds of critical comments between them. But I'll clarify that even with one of my worst ratios, it did still have about like 92% likes. We're generally a very positive community here, and I appreciate that. So in that spirit, I found some excellent constructive critiques among all those responses, and I made some changes to my homebrew ideas for stat blocks that I think even more of 92% of people might enjoy. Because I'm Bob, this is where we learn how to have more fun playing RPGs together, but even I have the very human need to explain why a lot of people who left critical comments on my video kind of took things out of context. Wait, that's not dramatic enough. I gotta start off by literally destroying the people who harassed me by defeating them with logic and facts. And I promise it does connect to the thesis of this video. So pretty much the first thing that I decided wasn't very fun or useful in the sample stat block, the D&D 5e Goblin boss, was its subtype, Goblinoid. And naturally, lots of people said, but the Ranger's favored enemy feature uses the creature subtype. So I said, but since the subtype is Goblinoid, it's already in the name, it's redundant. And you probably see where this is going. But Bob, what about bugbears? How is a new game master supposed to know bugbears are goblinoids if it's not in their name or in the stat block? Obvious answer, it's listed in the lore and descriptions right next to the stat block. But I didn't say that, because this is where I realized I must not have done a good enough job explaining my criteria for what belongs on a stat block. So take 2. I was cutting unused, underused, and redundant words, even if those words are game mechanics, with the ultimate goal being to make a concise but super fun stat block that any game master, new or experienced, can easily read and use during combat with as little prep as possible. Versus this defense of the bugbear's goblinoid subtype basically saying that any word with a mechanic tied to it must be kept on the block at all costs. Seriously. Just for the bugbear's goblinoid subtype to be useful in this scenario, a player must choose to be a ranger, and then choose humanoid for their favorite enemy, and then choose goblinoid as a subtype, and then the party must encounter bugbears, but then the party must not simply want to fight these bugbears, no. They must be trying to track them, or learn information about them, or speak to them in the goblin language, because that's what the ranger's favorite enemy feature does. But here's the kicker. Even if all that happens and no one in the group knows that bugbears are goblinoids, what's the worst case scenario impact on the fun? The ranger misses getting advantage on their check to track or recall information about bugbears. That's it. They can still make the check, and they can still speak to bugbears in common, because that's also on the bugbear stat block. But hopefully, during character creation, even that brand new GM listened to their player's choice of favorite enemy, then did like 5 seconds of Googling to look for goblinoid enemies to put them up against, and discovered, oh, okay, yeah, the bugbear's a goblinoid. So all that to say, yes, the surprising number of people who commented about the creature subtype being useful were technically correct, and heck, I've probably overlooked some other crucial reason that subtype matters. Go ahead and put it in the comments. But I insist that it is underused, redundant, and has almost zero chance of impacting anyone's fun while actually playing the game. Because my own group hasn't needed subtype on a 5e stat block for as long as I can remember. And that's really the only reason I need to remove it. Because this is my homebrew. Finished that take just before a plane decided to show up. Okay, but before we get into my second point to utterly obliterate the remaining critical comments, we got a wonderful sponsor to help impact your fun while actually playing the game. James RPG Art. James is a real, human artist who loves RPGs, and he creates animated scenes for a variety of fantasy locations as a visual way to better immerse yourself and your players in the game. He has animated scenes that fit in any fantasy world, like this one, and this one. And he has a ton of scenes for official D&D 5e adventures, like Curse of Strahd, or one of my favorites, The Lost Mine of Phandelver. So you can browse and download the entire list of locations from his website, or join the James RPG Art Patreon, where for just $2, you can access all the animated location art, plus non-animated versions of those scenes, and support a real human artist. Link in the description. Thanks, James, for sponsoring this video. Now here's a worthwhile critique on the whole creature subtype thing. It's only one single word on some stat blocks, so even if it's incredibly unlikely to impact the fun, why remove it? Because it is one of many single words in a typical 5e stat block that are unused, underused, and or redundant, especially to new game masters who, I think, benefit from concise monsters that are easier to read and use while trying to run one of their first combats, the most complicated part of Dungeons & Dragons. And guess what? Dungeons & Dragons agrees with me. Yeah, this is supposed to be like the big flex, the Egg Snatcher, one of 2 monster stat blocks published in the D&D Beginner Adventure Peril and Primebrook, written specifically for educators who have no experience running D&D to run the game for their students who have no experience playing D&D, and both stat blocks look like this. No creature type, subtype, size, alignment, no details for armor or hit dice, no movement speed or distance, no ability scores, no modifiers, no saving throws, skills, or senses, or distances on those senses, no languages, challenge rating, proficiency bonus, immunities, or even bonus actions and reactions. Because, according to the D&D design team, all of that mechanical information, while technically useful, would simply clutter the space for a new GM when all they truly need from the book to run a fun combat is AC, HP, and 1 attack, telling them how this monster takes damage and deals damage. Now, just like the Bugbear having Goblinoid listed in their lore, we do get some fun information on Egg Snatchers in the read-aloud text. Between you and the eggs stand 2 strange creatures the size of horses. They have bodies like frogs, but their skin is pure white, and they have mouths full of sharp teeth. Then, with powerful hops, they hurl themselves towards you. But I agree with the D&D design team here that the beginner game master, or really any game master, does not need a book to tell them exactly how many feet of distance a horse-sized frog creature can jump, or how many feet away an adventurer has to be for that monster to be able to bite them. Like, obviously they have to be able to touch them for that. So despite what a lot of comments put forth, I think that this ultra-concise stat block doesn't hurt the game master. It encourages them to use their own imagination and their players' imaginations to fill in anything that feels like a gap to them, and fill it with whatever feels fun in the moment. And if the GM isn't sure about something they want the monster to do, let the dice decide. That's what they're there for. So even though I may enjoy reading and writing intricate RPG rules, got a new video about weapon features probably coming in the next couple weeks, I will always favor the rule of cool when I'm actually running the game. And that brings us to the next point. This ultra-concise stat block, it isn't very cool, is it? Just a bite? We can do better than this, and that's where MCDM comes in. Hello? Mr. Bugbear? That's pretty neat. Another misconception. Some people thought I was bashing MCDM's Goblin Boss stat block and clearly favoring the one from Shadowdark, and yeah, visually, I was crossing things out on MCDM, but I didn't mean that to look like I was grading it harshly. I was using it like a beautiful block of marble and carefully chiseling away to retain the cool ideas, just with fewer words so you can quickly read it during combat. Side note, even though I love Shadowdark as a whole and I like the direction of those monsters, I have some trouble reading these stat blocks during combat too. It's mostly just the ability scores, and we'll get into that later. Oh, we got another plane coming between takes here. My timing is on today. All right, but tell me in the comments which United States Northeast cryptid is gonna get me while I have my back to this thing? So constructive critique number 1. People pointed out that in my chiseling of MCDM's block, I chiseled away some of the fun, informative flavor by removing the cool names for features and leaving only the function of what the feature did as a game mechanic. Those bold, descriptive names are anchors to the eye, they're packed with flavor, and they can be copied from one stat block to another for easier reading across multiple stat blocks. So altogether, that is good design, and I made sure to put them back on my new stat blocks, which we can finally get into. The Froglin. This monster makes a pretty good sample because just from the name, you could probably have a solid idea of what this creature is like, whether you've played D&D for 50 years or not at all. But to immediately clarify what it's like, every one of my homebrewed stat blocks starts with a one-sentence description. In this case, small amphibious humanoid with oversized eyes and oily, vibrant skin. You'll notice the words small and humanoid are in bold because this homebrew 5th edition creature's size, type, and alignment have been packed into that flavorful description. But Bob, where's the alignment here? Good eye. The Froglin and any monster descriptions without a size or alignment listed are medium or neutral because by their own definitions, those terms, medium and neutral, are non-descriptive default values. And the very point of a default value is that it can be assumed in the absence of other information. So I didn't include them in these flavorful descriptions. And to be clear, every explanation for how to use every part of the stat block is summarized in the PDF that contains these stat blocks, so it's not like a helpless, brand new GM is going to somehow stumble onto my homebrew without seeing all the background info they could need. But now here's a suggestion that I got positive feedback about. Immunities to conditions, damage types, and damage resistances, vulnerabilities are all listed right next to armor class and hit points, so they're way easier to remember in battle. Major quality of life improvement for GMs everywhere. Give this video a thumbs up if you agree. Another easy one, ability score modifiers are listed without the full scores, which are virtually never used. And for senses, passive perception isn't spelled out for every monster, but in case you happen to need it, everything you need to calculate it is right in the same area. You're adding like 2 numbers together. But also, special senses have been ungamified with little to no impact on gameplay. For example, the average person knows that night vision, scent, hearing doesn't just stop at 60 feet. So these arbitrary sharp cutoffs are actually counterintuitive for the new GM. And it is very rare, in my experience, that those cutoffs create more fun at the table. Usually it comes up when the party peeks into a room, the GM describes the room, and then realizes they actually shouldn't have been able to see the altar with the cultist because it's 65 feet away. However, distance is important specifically for 5e blind sight, which is very powerful because it allows a monster to even see invisible creatures all around it, usually by super smell or hearing, and usually only out to about 10 or 20 feet. So getting rid of that distance entirely would be kinda nuts. So in those cases, I've replaced blind sight with either 5e tremor sense, sensing vibrations in the ground but not the air, or with 5e keen smell or keen hearing, which already give advantage to locate things with those senses at any distance. And here's the change that kinda inspired this whole idea to rethink stat blocks. Weapon and spell attack rolls have been streamlined. For example, kick/rock, A, +4, parentheses, 1d4 + 2, close parentheses. Oh, Bob, what does this string of code possibly mean? Remember, it's all defined in the supplement with these stat blocks, but you can probably guess it means the Froglin can use their action to attack with a kick or a rock by rolling 1d20 + 4. If the attack roll meets or exceeds the target's AC, it hits, and the Froglin deals 1d4 + 2 damage to the target's hit points. Quick comparison, this format turns a whole paragraph of a stat block like this, where every attack repeats almost the exact same information, into one short line containing only the information that you need. Well, to be fair, this stat block doesn't tell the brand new GM which die to roll to hit, the d20 of course, but even the regular D&D 5e stat block doesn't tell them that. And another popular critique on this part of my first video said that having words between those numbers is really important for delineating information while reading. But frankly, delineating information while reading is exactly what parentheses are for. So this works perfectly for me, my homebrew. As for ranges, special attacks clarify adjacent, near, or far distance, but for these simple attack rolls, both new and experienced GMs can intuit that a kick attack must be against an adjacent target in melee, while a rock attack could be used to bash in melee or thrown, and personally, I would give a Froglin disadvantage on thrown rock attacks farther than 30 feet, but if another GM approves 60 feet or farther, so be it. It really doesn't matter. Like most damage types in 5e, so a kick obviously deals bludgeoning damage, while a rock may deal bludgeoning or piercing or slashing, all at the GM's discretion, but for almost all 5e gameplay, those three damage types behave the exact same way, meaning they are not useful for a new GM to run a fun game. So they're not indicated here, but special damage like fire, acid, and cold are listed. And yes, I know there's things like skeletons and oozes, of course, that those damage types matter, but they usually don't matter. Okay, now I'm just going to skip to my favorite part that I've added in, group actions. Not every monster has one because they don't make sense for every monster, but the Froglin here can perform a croaking chant with 5 other Froglins, all using their actions for that round to summon one giant frog. When does it appear? When they summon it. Where does it appear? Wherever seems fun. How does it appear? Apparently by plane, flying through the sky. No, however seems fun. When does it attack? On the GM's turn, of course. And how many giant frogs can these little Froglins summon? I'm glad you asked. Since this group action is pretty powerful, I made it a recharge ability, meaning as usual for 5e, it can be used once, then the GM rolls 1d6 on the initiating Froglin's turn each round, and the attack recharges if they roll a 6. But none of these Froglins involved in the chant may aid another summoning chant until that initiating Froglin recharges it or dies. Again, all explained in the supplement, but what's the worst case scenario for this rule being forgotten or misinterpreted by a new game master? A few extra giant frogs pop in and capture the party by swallowing them? That sounds like a fun and memorable encounter to me. And yeah, one other thing I know is fun because it received easily the most positive feedback so far, I added loot for each monster. This Froglin drops a vial of poison and a shiny trinket. That's cool, and it's worthy of a like on this video, right? And for the other minimalists out there, a one-line version of each stat block to easily copy into your notes. And I gotta say, maybe my favorite unintended part of this design was that every stat block is about the same size. My shortest one, this mud crab, which can still burrow, swim, camouflage, grapple targets in its claws, and drops loot like natural armor material and rations. It's not that much smaller than the longest stat block in this supplement, the Witch, who has a bunch of cool spells, all completely explained right in the stat block. So, remember to check out the amazing human artist James RPG Art on Patreon. Then after that, maybe go to my Patreon shop tab and get this PDF of about 50 reimagined fantasy monsters, also available on DriveThruRPG, links below. Huge thank you to the Bob World Builder patrons who directly support what I do. Thank you, and keep building. Man, that was a close one. I almost doxed myself. I really hope nobody finds out that I live in this hole. All right.